today is day 11 of my GMAT Prep. I gave my first official GMAT Focus Edition practice exam on day 10 to get a sense of what my baseline score looks like if I were to take the test without any prep or with minimal prep. On the surface, my scores look pretty bad, but that is not the whole story. Here is why I say that. If you were to look at my screen, I've just pulled up a GMAT score matrix. The one that is highlighted is the one from GMAT Club. You will see similar matrices from different providers scattered all over the internet. This score matrix only applies to the old version of the GMAT, where your final score was just a function of your scores on the quant section and the verbal section. Let's just focus on the matrix from GMAT Club for a start. If you were to look on the x-axis, it gives you the verbal scores and the corresponding verbal percentile scores, and on the y-axis you have the quant scores and the corresponding quant percentile scores. If you just connect the dots, you would remember that I scored in the 81st percentile on the quant section and the 96th percentile on the verbal section on the practice exam. Going by this matrix, that would put me at a score of around 720 to 740 on the old GMAT exam. Now obviously I made a fatal error on the data insight section on the practice exam, where I lost a sense of time and did not mark answers on all the questions that I was unable to get to within the time limit. Overall, I am doing alright on the quant and verbal sections, even though there is still scope for improvement. I do need to brush things up on those sections so that I am able to perform well on those sections consistently. However, it is the data insight section that is going to require a lot of my attention going forward. With that out of the way, here is what I'm going to do next. From everything I've done in my GMAT prep till now, here are the things I know. On the quant section, I'm generally doing alright, but there are occasions where I completely blank out on questions that are related to topics such as probability or counting. These are the topics that I was also struggling with on the practice exam. I also need to do much better with time management, specifically with being willing to let go of hard questions if I'm unable to solve them within a certain time limit. I need to remember that the GMAT Focus Edition has a much shorter time frame of 45 minutes for the quant section, which makes it harder to recover any lost time. Also, there is a feature called bookmarks, which can actually help you if you only learn to use it well. Because I'm not very familiar with this feature yet, I plan to develop a strategy over the next few weeks on how to best use that feature of the GMAT Focus Edition. On the verbal section, I've actually done way better than I anticipated, but I still need to brush up concepts so that I'm able to be more intentional when I run into a hard problem. I also need to traverse the trade-off between velocity and accuracy much better on this section. Coming to data insights, this is a section that I think will require a good 3 to 4 weeks of preparation from my end. This section is completely new to me, just like it is for everybody else that is taking the GMAT Focus Edition. As a result, I don't have any reference on how to manage time on this particular section. I also have scope to improve my accuracy meaningfully on this section of the GMAT. Going by my practice exam, my baseline score stands at something around 600. Even though I think that score is artificially depressed because of the error I made on the data insight section, I am going to move forward with my prep, taking that as my baseline score. That said, I do expect to have an updated baseline for my score in the coming weeks once I've taken another practice exam after about 1 to 2 weeks of preparation. If my baseline score goes up significantly, I can alter my study plan accordingly. Refer to my video from day 10 of my GMAT prep if you're curious about what my practice exam experience was like and what are some of the mistakes I made which I think you should avoid to get a cleaner handle on your baseline score. In addition to all of the inputs I just mentioned, I do have a rough sense of when I want to give the GMAT. Oftentimes that date will be determined by external factors such as when you plan to apply to B schools and any particular application deadlines that might be coming up. With that said, let me now get into creating my initial study plan using all of the inputs that I've gathered in my GMAT prep till date. Alright, so I spent about 30 minutes putting together a study plan for myself. First, I actually want to talk about the thought process a little bit. So broadly, there are actually two approaches you can take as far as sequencing your preparation across the 3 sections of the GMAT is concerned. You can either prepare for the easiest section first, or you can prepare for the hardest section first. The rationale for each would be the following. If you're preparing for the easiest section first, you probably want to develop some momentum, you want to have some sense of progress, and so on. On the other hand, if you're preparing for the hardest section first, you are optimizing for doing the hardest thing right at the start. So people who have a very high degree of impulse control usually lean towards this kind of approach. My recommendation is actually a mix of these two things. What I recommend is that you go with the easiest section first. The intention there is just for you to gain momentum and to have some sense of progress quite quickly within your GMAT preparation journey. Then you attack the hardest section second. And this is where what you're doing is you are basically using the momentum that you developed from the first section, and you're using all the early energy that you have in order to make the most impactful progress. Because this is your hardest section, it is likely that any progress you make on this one is going to have a disproportionate impact on your final GMAT score. And finally, you come to the section that is left, where really what you're trying to do is maybe make incremental progress as needed to give final touches to your GMAT preparation so that you're ready for test day. Given this recommendation, you already have a sense of the sequence in which I'm going to prep through the 3 sections. So I'm going to prep for the quant section first, followed by data insights, and finishing with the verbal section. Given I have the sequence in which I want to prepare for the 3 GMAT sections, let me also talk a little bit about what your share of time and effort invested should look like over the course of your GMAT prep. So if I go to this screen, roughly your GMAT prep would be divided into 4 different phases. You have one phase each for the 3 different sections, which show up on this image here as phases 1, 2, and 3, and then one final phase, phase 4, wherein you are integrating your preparation across the 3 different sections. In phase 1, which in my case is the quant section, what you would do is focus on just that one section. So your study sessions would be maybe somewhere between 45 to 60 minutes long, with an additional 20 to 30 minutes spent on analysis. If you want to spend additional time, you can always spend extra time on the same section instead of spreading yourself thin across multiple sections. At the end of this first phase, you will have mastered one section entirely, and you will be confident in managing the trade-off between accuracy and velocity on this particular section to maximize your score there. Then comes phase 2, where I'm going to focus on data insights. In phase 2, your study sessions should be heavily weighted towards the second section that you're preparing for. In my case, that is data insights. However, one of the key things that you need to ensure is that you do not lose touch with the first section that you prepared for. As a result, you will spend somewhere between 45 to 60 minutes on the section that is your primary focus in this phase. But at the same time, in every practice session, you need to make sure that you spend between 15 to 20 minutes on the section which was the focus of phase 1 of your preparation. A similar logic extends to phase 3 as well, where your primary focus becomes the third section that you need to prepare for. But in each study session, you will also make sure that you spend at least 15 to 20 minutes each on the 2 sections that you have completed preparing for as part of phases 1 and 2. Finally comes phase 4, where what you're doing is spending equivalent amounts of time across all the 3 sections. This is where you are actually integrating all the learnings that you have made over the course of your GMAT preparation journey, and this is your final sprint towards test day. If you approach things this way, what you will also realize is that the length of your practice sessions actually will increase over time. This is also intentional, because what we are trying to do is build mental resilience. As you know, on the final GMAT exam, you're going to need to be able to focus and solve GMAT problems for a straight 150 minutes. Of course, you will get a 10-minute break in between, but that is not a lot. Think of this as going to the gym. You start by lifting smaller weights, and over time you lift heavier and heavier weights till you get to your target outcome. Finally, let's get into what my study plan looks like. So today I am on day 11 of my prep. It is a Sunday. What I plan to do is spend the next 7 days on the quant section, and my intention at the end of those 7 days will be to give practice exam 2. What I am aiming for is to be able to achieve 100% accuracy within the required time limit. So I want to be able to solve 21 quant questions within 45 minutes and with 100% accuracy consistently. The reason why I'm aiming for 100% accuracy in this case is because I know I have achieved this performance in the past, and I know I can do that again. Then for the next 14 days or so, I'm going to focus on the data insight section while also continuing to keep in touch with the quant section. During this phase, I will take 2 practice exams, one on day 24 and one on day 31. Between practice exams 2 and 3, my focus will be on improving my accuracy on the data insight section. So I want to be able to get to a point where I'm able to answer 18 to 19 out of 20 questions correctly on a consistent basis. Now you might be thinking, where did I come up with this number of 18 to 19? Well, let's get into some of the metrics that I've been tracking over the past few days of my GMAT prep. On day 7, I had a practice session focused on the data insight section when I was able to achieve a 94% accuracy. On day 8, my accuracy was about 70%. After that, I attempted data insights questions on day 10 during the practice exam when my accuracy was again around 72%. Just doing some rough math, my baseline accuracy looks like 70% out of 20 questions right. So that's about 14 questions right. What I want to do is to be able to push that a little bit so that I'm able to answer at least 18 questions right. So I'm hoping that out of the 6 questions that I've been getting wrong out of 20 on average, I'm able to reduce that number and bring it down to 2 questions incorrect out of 20. From there, I will transition my focus to improving velocity on the data insight section while maintaining the accuracy that I've achieved. So between practice exam 3 and 4, what I want to be able to get to is a point where I can consistently answer 18 out of 20 data insights questions correctly while answering all of the 20 questions within the 45-minute time frame. Of course, once I get into this section, I might realize that it is very hard for me to achieve the accuracy or the velocity numbers that I'm aiming for, or I might realize that it's actually very easy for me to achieve these things. Either way, I will adjust my targets depending on what I learn. Then getting into phase 3, I plan to spend about 12 to 14 days on the verbal section, where once again I will first focus on accuracy and second focus on velocity. Because I've been doing generally alright on the verbal section, I might be able to divert some of the time that I've allocated to the verbal section to the data insight section if required. That is a decision which I will make depending on how my GMAT preparation is going. Assuming everything goes to plan, I will take practice exam 5 on day 38 and practice exam 6 on day 45. Hopefully by day 45, I am feeling confident enough that I've done my best across all the 3 sections. If at any point I feel like I can do better on a particular section, I might extend my preparation by a few days on that section if needed. But hopefully things don't come to that, and by day 46 I'm feeling good and I'm ready to get into integrated prep. Integrated prep is just another word for focusing on all 3 sections at a time. This is where the rubber hits the road and you start taking the practice exams once again. In an ideal scenario, your scores on the practice exam during these last few days will closely reflect the kind of score that you're likely to get on the final GMAT exam. So that is my study plan for the GMAT Focus Edition. Here is what I want to spend the rest of today's time on. If you have seen my last 3 or 4 videos, you know that I have been proactively putting off investing any effort into getting familiar with the features of the online question bank. Now that I have my study plan, it is the right time for me to work out how best to use the online question bank for my GMAT preparation. What I'm hoping to find is an easy way to pick a mix of easy to hard questions in every practice session, along with the ability to practice new questions in every session. Let me explain what I mean using the physical guides. One of the features of the official GMAT guide is that the questions are sorted from the easiest to the hardest within each section. So question number 1 is easier than 2, question 2 is easier than 3, and so on. So if you knew that the official GMAT guide has 300 questions in the quant section, for example, and you were planning to practice, let's say 30 questions in every study session, then you just divide 300 by 30, which comes to 10. Then what you do in every study session is attempt every 10th question from the physical official GMAT guide. So in my first quant study session, I will try question number 1, 11, 21, and so on. And then in my second study session, I will attempt questions 2, 12, 22, and so on. This is a simple way to ensure that you're not only practicing new GMAT problems in every study session, but also that the questions you're practicing range from easy to hard. That is the closest you can get to simulating the nature of the GMAT while using the physical official guides. I do not know at this point if the online question bank has any features that improves upon that. I am hoping to find that out as I explore the online question bank a little more. If the online question bank does not have the features I need, I will just go back to using the physical GMAT guides for my practice sessions. I have said previously that it is good for you to get used to seeing problems on a screen and then solving them on a piece of paper in front of you. And the online question bank is definitely good for that. However, that is a habit that you can easily pick up later on in your GMAT prep, once you have a handle on the accuracy and velocity for each section. With that said, let me get into the online question bank. Okay, I spent about 20 minutes exploring the online question bank and trying to generate different sets of practice questions from it, just to see if it can meet my requirements for my study plan going forward. Overall, my assessment is that the online question bank actually will not be able to meet my requirements as far as my practice sessions are concerned. Let me cover the reasons why. I like to design each of my practice sessions in this manner. First, all the questions that I attempt in a practice session should be new. In other words, I should not have tried any of those questions in a previous study session. Second, I should get a mix of easy, medium, and hard level problems in every study session. I think that this most closely mimics the nature of the final GMAT exam. As you probably know very well by this point, the GMAT adjusts the difficulty of questions to how you're performing on the test. And as a result, it is likely to throw a mix of easy, medium, and hard problems at you. Of course, on the final test, questions can appear in any arbitrary order of difficulty, and they are not always sorted easy to hard. But given the constraints of the physical guide and the online question bank, the best one can do is at least make sure that you are attempting a mix of easy, medium, and hard problems in every study session. I plan to follow these two rules religiously in the early phases of my GMAT prep. Once I have burned through all the questions in the official GMAT guides, I will then revisit all the questions that I answered incorrectly the first time around. Personally, I think that that is the best way to use the official GMAT guides, and I highly recommend that to you as well. Now let's talk about the online question bank. The online question bank gives you 4 different options to generate question sets for any practice or study session. Under the first option, it gives you the option to select all remaining questions. That means all the questions that you haven't attempted yet. Under this option, you're also able to select the duration of your practice session and the mode. Mode here has 2 options, study mode and exam mode. To the extent that I understand this right now, the only difference is that in study mode, the option to review answers is switched on, while in exam mode, it is switched off. When review answers is switched on, as it is in study mode, you're going to see the correct answer after you've submitted your selection for every question. I would never use that in my practice or study sessions any which way. So if I were to use this, I would always be in exam mode. The problem with using the all remaining questions setting is that it does not even give you the option to select what type of questions you want to see in the problem set. So you are unable to select whether you want to see quant questions only, or verbal only, or data insights only. That is an obvious pain point for me under this option. The second option is questions answered incorrectly. Now, as you can see on the screen, it says 0 questions out of 0 taken. This is because I reset the online question bank for myself because I wanted to start my study sessions from a clean slate. So effectively, this option is useless because it is not going to generate any questions at all. The third option is to choose number of questions. The only difference between this option and the first option is that you are able to limit the number of questions that the online question bank will generate in the practice set. So effectively, I have the same pain point with this as I have with the first option. I will simply not be able to choose what type of questions I want to see in the practice set. Finally, let's come to option 4, which allows you to choose the type, difficulty, and number of questions. This probably comes closest to what I am looking for. Under this option, you are able to select what type of questions you want to see in the problem set. You are able to choose question categories and whether you want to see easy, medium, or hard questions. You can actually go down to the number of questions of each slice that you want to see in a practice set. So in that sense, it is much better than the other 3 options that we explored. However, my pain point with this is the following. This option will work well for me for this first study session because it will give me new questions of the types that I want to see in the problem set. But what happens when I get to my second, third, or 15th study session? I highly suspect that it will start throwing the same set of questions over and over again across different study sessions. Like I said earlier, that is a problem for me because early on in my GMAT prep, I prefer to solve new problems every single day. I don't want to see the same question repeatedly because it will result in me getting the wrong indicators of how my GMAT prep is going. Let me explain. Let's say I solve questions 1 to 23 from the quant section on day 15. On day 16, the question bank somehow throws question 13 and 17 at me once again as part of the problem set on that day. Now, knowing myself, it is highly likely that when I read the same question again on a different day, I will probably remember solving the questions earlier and might even remember the answer that I arrived at. This pollutes my performance metrics because it will incorrectly indicate that I'm doing great on velocity when in reality I have technically cheated on the practice session because I already knew the answer to a couple of questions from my practice sessions earlier. So given all of this, I actually plan to shift gears and go back to being a caveman. Going forward, I will be using the physical official guides for my GMAT preparation. For what it's worth, they look so much more beautiful and colorful than the online question bank. Alright, so that is all for today. I'm going to stop my study session here for the time being. Because it is a Sunday, I might return to my desk in the evening for another study session. But otherwise, I will see you tomorrow on day 12 of my GMAT prep.